stare at it. I would like to talk about pretend it. At the beginning, the examiner has to record an introduction. So they have to say the date, your name, your number, the examiner's name. It usually takes about 30 seconds. You just need to hit save the date. They always have to record it. In total, the test will take anywhere from 11 minutes. And even if the candidate sits there and says nothing, it still takes 11 minutes. Can you tell me your full name, please? Let's talk about birthdays. When's your birthday? 11 minutes of awkward silence. Unless they run away, cry and run away. Conversely, it can take up to 14 minutes. So if you're someone who just cannot stop talking, oh, on the other hand, I'm not finished yet. I'd like to have that. Say, thank you very much. That's the end of the speaking test. It has to finish. It has to finish at 14 minutes. Even if all of the questions are not finished, even if you're still talking blah blah blah, they have to stop the test. The reason is it's a standardized test, so around the world it has to be the same duration. There are 3 parts, and you are marked on these 4 categories. So I'll briefly explain them. Fluency. Fluency means how quickly can you speak, and can you speak without stopping? Stopping means things like saying or silence. I think that it is good because silence is considered stopping. It also means how much do you correct yourself. I went to the park and it was very good. Better, good, gooder, good. So how much is your speech interrupted? Coherence means can you speak logically? Can you answer the questions? Can you develop your ideas? Can you explain things? How logically? So together, those are one category. Very often, in my experience, fluency is a big problem. I think it's a bad habit. I think it's a bad habit for many people. It's a bad habit. And I'll give an example. What's your name? What's your name? What's your name? What's your name? Where are you from? I'm from Australia. Where are you from? What do you do? There's one. There's one, thank you. Very often it's just a bad habit, right? What's your name? Dan. I know my name, but it's just a bad habit. So you may want to record yourself and listen for those bad habits. Do you work or are you a student? I work. You shouldn't have to say It's just a bad habit. So be careful with this one. Lots of people are doing that. Even though they know the answers, they have very good English, it's just a bad habit. Questions, blah, 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 blah. I agree. I think so. That's an interesting question. It's often a bad habit. Lexical resource again means vocabulary. Grammatical range and accuracy means range and accuracy. Pronunciation means not just how clear are your sounds, but it means things like can you use stress, including word stress and sentence stress? Can you use intonation? Today I would like to talk about an interesting birthday party I went to. It was with my best friend. That's flattering. Stress, intonation, connected speech. I think that it is good. Connected. A few other things. It does not mean how good is your English accent. It does not mean that. It only means how clearly can you be understood in English. Because you will never change your accent. It's impossible. In any second language, you'll never sound exactly like native speakers. It's impossible. Any language. So IELTS does not care
whether you have an Australian accent or a British accent or an Canadian accent, they don't care. They only care about how clear are your English sounds and how well can you use English pronunciation, like stress, intonation. Okay. So don't worry about trying to sound British or trying to sound American. It doesn't matter. You can sound whatever you want. You can even change. You can start Australian and finish British. It doesn't matter. Not important. Your scores, your final score is an average of these 4 categories. So 25% for each category, and your average is your speaking score. If you get 1999, that's a 7. So what happens in each of the 3 parts? Well, the first part is an introduction, where very basic, familiar questions are asked. So, for example, it might be about what do you do, student, or do you work? Where do you live? What's your house or apartment like? TV? Traveling? Time? Weather? Reminds me of weather. The internet. Very, very familiar topics. The questions are simple, but they'll get a little bit more complicated. So let's talk about TV. First question is always very simple. How much TV do you watch? You never say a lot. So the questions will start very basic, but they'll get a little bit more complicated within each topic. This will last anywhere from 4 to 5 minutes, and the topics are always familiar. So you don't need to worry too much about preparing. They're very simple questions. After that is part 2, so the examiner will give you the instructions. They'll tell you the instructions. And then they'll give you a topic. They'll give you a topic, and you'll have 1 minute to think about what you're going to say. And you'll also have some paper and a pencil if you want to make notes. Some people love to take notes. Some people hate to take notes. It's up to you. If you have a very, very good memory, you don't need to write anything. If you're like me and you have a terrible memory, you probably want to write some notes. But it's up to you. So you have 1 minute to prepare. After that, you are expected to speak for 1 to 2 minutes. When they say 1 to 2, they mean 2. You're expected to speak for 2 minutes. If you only speak for 1 minute, the examiner will just wait. I'd like to talk about a birthday. My mother had her birthday last week, and we bought a very delicious cake, and it was a very nice birthday party. Thank you. 14 seconds. Okay? The examiner will just wait. And you'll feel it. That means you still have time. So if you finish and the examiner is just looking, that means you still have time. You'll know it. You'll feel it. I still have. So you are expected to speak as much as possible. So think of it as 2 minutes. You want to speak as much as you can. If you don't speak enough, the examiner will just wait. If you have spoken for 2 minutes, the examiner will say thank you. Even if you haven't finished, it just means 2 minutes is up. Don't worry. Some people are really worried. Oh no! I didn't finish. I failed IELTS. Mom's going to kill me. I'm not going to the UK. My future is ruined. It just means 2 minutes is up. That's it. Not the end of the world. After that, the examiner will take back the booklet. Don't get to keep it. Otherwise, the whole world would know what the questions are. They'll take back the booklet. And part 3, questions which are related to your topic here, but a little bit more abstract. So here, if I was talking about a birthday party, celebrated. This one might be about birthdays, celebrations. So it's related to part 2, but it's a little bit more abstract. If you describe your favorite teacher, this might be about education. Somehow it's education, but it's a little bit more abstract. This will take 4 to 5 minutes, and the questions will become stranger and stranger and stranger. And very often there's things you've never thought about before. And you say, what? I don't know. I have no idea. You cannot say that in IELTS. You can't say, no, can you ask a different question, please? I don't like that. No, I don't know. Can you ask a different question? Tough luck. So you need to think of ways to deal with difficult questions. The common reaction is, that's the common answer. So what do you think about strange blah, blah, blah? Can you repeat the question? So there are ways in English to deal with that. The most common is, well, that's an interesting question. They're not really interesting questions. Well, that's an interesting question. Sometimes people use that in part 1. So do you work or are you a student? That's an interesting question. Okay. But there are many ways in English that you can kill time. Well, just stretch it. Well, I've never thought about that before, but it's a very common way. I understand. Well, yes, I'd have to say there are many ways. But make sure you have some strategies because the questions will be difficult, strange, and things you've never thought about before. Make sure you have some strategies. I won't spend too much time. You already have a copy of this. Very similar to speaking. They give you the criteria for each band score. Categories. Again, 7 is the clearest, I find. 7 is the clearest. Those are very useful. Again, it's complicated. The language is very complicated, but it's worth understanding. Focus on 7. Although speaking 6 is also quite clear. A few tips. It helps if you speak English because it's testing your English. The more comfortable you are with English, the better you'll do. Some people are absolutely against speaking English until the IELTS test, and they tend to do very poorly. For some reason, people don't like speaking English to each other, I find. So if a Vietnamese person speaks with another Vietnamese person, they'll almost never use English. It's weird. Well, unless you can find other people to speak English to, those are the only people you can talk to. So I know it might feel weird to speak English to someone from your own country, but it really helps to get comfortable and it improves your fluency and all those kinds of things. So try to use English as much as you can, even though it feels strange. Although accuracy is important, speaking with perfect grammar will be very, very slow. And it will affect your fluency because you're going to think a lot. I was going to go to the party until I had called my friend. But but I was really slow, and it often affects your fluency. I will have been going to the party. I will have gone to the. What do you think? Just give me a second. That's going to affect you. It is okay to ask the examiner to repeat a question. In part 1, you're allowed to ask the examiner to repeat. The examiner cannot explain a question in part 1. They can only repeat. Okay? For part 1. For part 2, it's okay if you ask, what does this word mean? So if you get a topic, I'd like you to describe a that you used in the past. What's a fluffer? Oh, it's a pen. Ah. So you can ask definitions part 2. Part 3, it's okay to ask the examiner to explain. If you don't understand, the examiner can change the words. Say, sorry, I don't quite understand that. Sorry, what exactly do you mean by that question? The examiner can explain. IELTS is a language test, not a truth test, so it's okay to tell a lie. It's okay to tell a lie. If it gives you better English, then say whatever you want, even if it's a complete lie. Okay? So I was born in my village, I lived in my village, and I have never left my village until today when I came to the British Council. So, tell me about your last holiday. I never go on holiday. I stay in my village. Okay. Do you enjoy traveling in your country or to foreign countries? As I said before, I live in my village. Okay. Do you travel with friends or family? I keep telling you, I live in my village. That will give you very good language. And it might irritate you then. So it's okay. You can say, well, just last week I went to Singapore. I went to Orchard Road with my friends. It's a complete lie. I stay in my village, but it gives me better language. So tell a lie if it gives you good language. If you can't remember a specific word, just explain it. So if I forget the word for that thing, does your classroom have any technology? Yes, in my classroom we have in my classroom we have a machine which shows the computer on the screen. Projector. So it's okay to just explain it if you don't know. The worst thing is you try and remember. It's a just explain. Always explain and justify your answers, especially in part 3. If you are not speaking enough, the examiner will keep asking you little follow-up questions. Why? With who? When? Where? Where? Why? Where? Who? Where? Why? How? Where? Why? If you keep hearing these questions, it means you're not speaking enough. So that's a good hint from the examiner that you need to start speaking more. So do you prefer traveling in your country or to other countries? Yes, in my country. Why? It's very interesting. Why? Well, especially in part 3, make sure you always explain as much as you can. If you're saying too much, the examiner will politely interrupt. You'll often notice there. That means you're talking too much. If you cannot stop, they'll just say, thank you. I'm not finished. Again, a few ways to ask for clarification. So, part 1, sorry, could you repeat that? Could you repeat the question? Part 2, you can ask a definition. Circus means. Does spare time mean free time? In part 3, you can ask them to explain. For part 1, you can ask to repeat. Part 2, you can ask for definition. Relax. Think of it as a chat. Just a chat. It's an exam. It's a chat. Just a chat. Don't prepare speeches before the day. It's very, very obvious. Very obvious. Examiners know. It's a nice thing to introduce part 2. So if the question is, describe your favorite teacher, a lot of people say, can you start speaking now, please? My favorite teacher is Miss Lane. She was my math teacher in primary school. You need to introduce. Today I'd like to talk about my favorite teacher. My favorite teacher is Miss Lane. And finally, use that 1 minute, not only to think of your ideas, but also to think of your language. So if you think of a good vocabulary or a good collocation, make sure you write it on paper. So don't just use the paper for ideas. But if you have good vocabulary, it helps you to remember. And it helps you to use it if it's on the paper. So that can help. And like I said, using phrases instead of you can say things like, well, actually, you know, in my view, it's things instead of saying,